I really can't think of a similar situation ever where an administration finds itself so often in conflict even with itself, even having the administration challenge when the SBA thinks the EPA is off target, and that wasn't handled sometime before a rule was laid down, a proposed regulation was laid down. You wonder why not? Why wouldn't we be managing this discussion in a better way? Why wouldn't we be moving the country forward in a better way? It's ignoring the voters, an incredible tragedy in a democracy. Ignoring the law, even a more credible tragedy in a constitutional democracy. According to reports, the president's considering two requirements on deciding on the 11 million people that are here without documents. They either came illegally or stayed illegally, and what to do about that. The president is looking at the length of time as a qualifier. Nowhere in the law is that a qualifier. Looking at the ties people might have to others in the country. These requirements, depending on how broadly they're drawn, could wind up with the president's announcement as early as Friday, leaving another 5 million people in the country in a status that I don't quite understand, and they won't either. When you're here based on an executive order, that is totally dependent on one thing: who's the executive? When you're here based on the law, that's very dependent on everything having to come together that changes the law before your status would change. Well, why would we put people in that kind of jeopardy? Why would we send that kind of mixed message? After legislation overhauling the immigration process died in the Congress, the president says he's going to act on his own. I can't find that part of the Constitution that allows that to happen. And in fact, in statements made more than one time, he couldn't find it either. Statements made more than one time by the president where he said, I can't do this on my own. We are a nation of laws. That's his observation about who we are, not my observation about who we are. And I know there'll be people on this side of the Capitol building who say, well, we sent something over there. I didn't vote for it, but it doesn't mean I'm not aware that it was sent to the House. But the House sent a bill over here, too. Apparently, both the House and Senate are so far from where the other side is that neither is willing to take up the other bill. But that's the Constitution. The Constitution is designed so that when we change law, we do that in a fairly cumbersome way. But that's served our country pretty well for a long time. And it's not up to the president to decide that that can be suspended on a topic that he thinks is important and a topic that he, in fact, has previously said he couldn't do on his own. As he was talking about this the last several months, not just Republicans, but Republicans and Democrats, and I will admit, particularly Democrats in close races around the country, said that the president was overstepping his authority. The president is putting people in jeopardy of not knowing whether they're really here on some kind of basis that nobody has quite defined or quite understands, even after he acts. Recently, a union representing thousands of federal immigration officers raised an alarm that the United States government had ordered supplies to create millions of blank work permits and green cards. According to the reports that followed that union report, the new federal contract proposal for Homeland Security would allow the government to buy enough supplies to make as many as 34 million immigrant work permits and residency cards over the next 5 years. Now, we issue immigrant work permits all the time, but not at the level that's being talked about here. Nobody's contended, by the way, that we just got a particularly good opportunity to buy a lot of card stock. I haven't heard that given as the reason. So these people that work with that every day were saying, what's going on here? The president of the National Citizenship and Immigration Services Council, the union representing 12,000 immigration service agents, called reports about planned executive action dangerous. People that deal with this every day, that's his word, and said it would increase exponentially the health risks, the threats to national security, and expense to taxpayers that he said are on the rise because of lax enforcement of immigration laws already. Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution declares that the president shall take care that the laws are faithfully executed. That the president, quote, shall take care that the laws are faithfully executed, ending that quote out of the Constitution. But simply put, these constitutional requirements are just that. They're requirements that the president shall take care that the laws are faithfully executed, to execute the acts of the Congress, to enforce the law as written and signed into law by some president and never changed by the current president, would indicate that's what the law is, and the president is supposed to enforce the law. Yet President Obama continues to refuse in this and other areas to show a willingness to try to convince the Congress to change the law, rather than assume that if the Congress doesn't do this, I will. As I said earlier and will say again, I'm still trying to find that phrase in the Constitution that says if the Congress doesn't do this, the president can. Whether it's issuing waivers to states from the work requirements contained in the Bipartisan Welfare Reform Act of 1996, or announcing another change in the president's health care law, and I've lost count of how many changes on his own the president has had the administration do. They continue to look for ways to circumvent what the law says. A nation of laws, respect for the laws. Americans are appropriately concerned that government is just too willing to overreach and at the same time unbelievably dysfunctional, whether it's kids at the border or the Secret Service that can't keep people out of the White House, or how we dealt with Ebola. We've got a Center for Disease Control, and when we have a disease control problem, we have to put somebody else in charge. What's wrong with that? That's why I introduced the Enforce the Law Act in March, a bill that would allow Congress to authorize a legal case to be brought against a president if he fails to uphold the law as written. This bill would restore the system of checks and balances reiterated in the Constitution. The Enforce the Law Act removes the procedural barriers and then would allow the House or Senate or both together to jointly adopt a resolution that just says we don't believe the law is being enforced. There's a set of regulations out now on the Clean Water Act, which did give the federal government the authority, the EPA the authority to monitor and have some authority over the navigable waters of the United States. I don't have any doubt in the 70s when that happened that people thought navigable waters. In the 1970s, they thought navigable waters meant the same thing they thought navigable waters meant when it was first put into federal law in the 1880s. But suddenly navigable waters in the new rule means any water, anywhere that could ever become part of water, that could become part of water, that could become navigable. This is a case that could easily be litigated sooner rather than later, long before people try to comply with an area where the federal government will turn out not to have control, as they did in a number of areas this year. So I hope we will look at that again. The House has passed it in a bipartisan manner. The Congress should be concerned about enforcing the law as written. As the Constitution says, both the members of the Congress and the President of the United States should be concerned about enforcing the law as written. And I thank the President for the time and yield the floor.